to call the meeting back to order. We are on item 1, to reiterate consideration with possible action on resolution providing for face covering within the city of Green Bay, effective July 27, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. Comments?
Do we need to do that amendment now, or because that wasn't, I just stated, yeah, so I'd like to amend section on definitions with, there we go.
Could you read that amendment again, Alder?
Yeah, and the indoor open area, the amendment would be indoor area accessible to the public means any interior area of any structure or premises licensed by the city of Green Bay or used in whole or in part as a place of resort, assemblage, lodging, trade, traffic, occupancy, or other use by the public to which the public customarily has access.
Do we have a second for that amendment?
Second.
The motion has been made to amend by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. Discussion on the amendment?
If you could clarify, did you just add a few words at the end, Alder Scannell?
What would you like?
I was at, my apologies, I had my mute on, but I was just wondering if you could point. I was wondering where, I found where you were changing it, but where did you just change words at the end? Is that all you did was add some words?
Right,
Correct?
I believe so.
And what were the words again?
Certainly, do you want me to reread the whole thing?
Nope. What you added at the end?
Just at the end, okay.
Like we're customary or something?
In which the public customarily has access.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Further discussion, questions on the amendment? Alder Weary?
Okay, well, this is just on the amendment, right? So we'd be voting on this. Then once that vote's done, we would be voting on the amended ordinance. Correct. So I know we had that discussion before, so, okay. If I could ask Alder Scannell the purpose of changing this, because it kind of went from vague to vaguer. I don't know. It didn't really clarify. Maybe you could explain.
It's supposed to be more specific, actually. It's
I guess.
That's legal for, that's the legalese. What I could speak to it, or is there would legal rather do that? Could they?
Sure, we could either go to Attorney Chavez or Assistant City Attorney Mather.
I'm curious, Alder Scannell, wasn't it your suggestion? Don't you know why you put it in there?
I could give the background on it.
Okay. I don't.
From Steve Grenier about he had thought I had something to do with framing the language of the ordinance, and I told him I didn't, and he told me his concerns that according to the way it was written now, somebody in an office all by themselves could be in violation of the ordinance. So I said, well, I don't know, run that by Vanessa. So he did, and they decided that, yes, that's true. So let's change the language so that if you're alone in your office, this doesn't apply.
Okay. That does it. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I do have more, I guess.
On the amendment, Alder?
Not right now. Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the amendment specifically?
Mayor?
Yes.
This is Alder LaFave.
Go ahead, Alder.
Yes, I agree. That's a good thing to put in. I also had Paul Fontecchio from the county asking me about this. He lives in Green Bay, but he had mentioned too that his office, he's all by himself whenever he's in his office. And there are other offices in the county where people are not interacting at all. And I mentioned to him, I believe that we would put something like that in, So I think this is appropriate. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. And that was always the intent. This is, simply clarifying that, making it clear.
Sure.
Additional
Thank you.
comments or questions on the amendment?
Mayor?
Yes, Alder Galvin.
Thank you, Your Honor. The example given was an individual in their own private office within a non-public area of the building. At our own city hall, during council meetings, we have custodial staff that'll be working by themselves in and amongst the hallways and some of the rooms. There's no council meetings. Would that staff be allowed to go maskless in this case?
We'll go to Attorney Chavez. Or Assistant Attorney Mather, who's ever available. While we're waiting, I would just a bit of housekeeping. We have
My
a lot.
apologies.
That's okay. We have a lot of participants on the line, and that's perfectly fine. But just to let people know, you can view the meeting on YouTube as well, and then we don't have to be worried about people being muted or unmuted. So that is an option for everyone. Attorney Chavez.
So I think that it is appropriate to tell you what the policy is right now at City Hall. So the way we are working it, at least in my department, is if people are outside of their office in the common space, then the expectation is that a person is going to be wearing a mask. The reason being that we're trying to keep the common areas uncontaminated. Now, as far as your question goes, the way the ordinance is structured, it would require anytime somebody's inside in an area where the public customarily has access.
Okay. So in business X, anywhere in that building that the public does not customarily have access, the employees could technically go maskless? Or if there's
Correct.
a crowd of employees, would they then have to wear masks?
It is where the public customarily has access.
All right. Thank you very much. That clarifies it very well for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Additional thoughts or questions on the amendment? Okay, seeing none. Alder Weary, you can.
I don't know what the official signal is, so I just tried all of them.
Yes, go ahead.
If I could, I know we get right into our business, and I wanted, and this is, I'm sure everybody feels this on the council, but I wanted to thank everybody for speaking up and for being so patient. It's not easy to speak in front of council. We're used to it. We're old hats now, but it's not easy to put yourself on the line like that. So I wanted to thank them and everybody who reached out. I know I've had probably 400 emails and calls, and I'm sure everybody else has. And I read them all. I responded to them. So thank you for doing that. I'm sure everybody agrees with that. I'm going to vote no on this because I'm going to vote no on it in the end. So why would I amend something I'm going to vote for in the end? I have a whole list of reasons why, but for now, suffice it to say I'm going to vote no on this amendment. We can discuss the rest later. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Certainly echo your comments. Appreciate all the testimony that was offered. Any additional comments on the amendment? Hearing none, we have a motion to amend. We have a second. All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Board it.
Aye.
Board it, please.
We have a request to use the board. We will do so.
Alder Steuer,
I believe he was backed out too far out of the program, and that'll be a verbal voice vote.
He may need to press star 6 like I did.
Come on, Mark.
Alder Steuer,
I'm at the text.
you can vote verbally, sir.
I'm on the phone and I can't get through here. I
You can
say
vote
no.
verbally.
You're in.
Alder.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I said no.
Thanks, Alder.
No, Mark.
And that amendment succeeds 9-3. Can we put that back up just a second? I just want to make sure. Okay, yep. That amendment succeeds 9-3. So now we have the item as amended on the floor. We have some speakers who have pressed their button, so we will go to Alder Dorf.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And yes, I would personally like to thank everyone who has spoken tonight and who spoke at the meeting. And also to thank the over 500 people that called me and emailed me and did the poll on my Facebook. And I want to assure all of you that your voice has been heard. Many studies that you've sent have been read, and several videos have been watched. Many more people than we saw tonight at council have weighed in on this. This was just a small portion of the people who communicated with me. As of 2 o'clock today, 198 persons who communicated with me were not in favor of the mask mandate, and 308 persons were in favor of it. And so this means no matter how I vote, hundreds of people are going to be angry with the way I voted. For every scientific study or professional viewpoint expressed to me and presented to me in favor of wearing a mask to prevent the spread of COVID-19, an opposing study or viewpoint has also been presented. There is no universal agreement on this. Judging from what I have heard and read from people opposed to mandated mask wearing, most will absolutely refuse to wear a mask to protect others from this virus. Not all, definitely not all, but most will. Asking for people to voluntarily wear a mask, sadly, does not seem like an option. My understanding for why wearing masks is important is mainly to protect others, to protect the elderly, people with immune system disorders, or other health factors that make them more vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. The mask ordinance as presented addresses most of the concerns of the people that contacted me and were against mandating masks in Green Bay. It is time limited, although what is the end date? When will when will this emergency be over? Nobody knows for sure, but when it is, we won't have to wear masks anymore. It is not required for children under 5. That was a concern expressed to me. It is not required for people eating or consuming beverages. That was a concern. It's not required for people with any type of a medical condition or disability that would prevent them from wearing a face covering. It is not required for people who are communicating with a deaf and hard of hearing, or in settings where it's not feasible or practical to wear a mask, such as dental services. I have heard and read much testimony regarding this ordinance, including most recently a letter from the local presidents and CEOs of Aurora Baycare Medical Center, Baycare Clinic, Bellman Health, St. Vincent, St. Mary's Hospital, Bellman Health, and Prevea Health, which cite current CDC recommendations and support adoption of an ordinance requiring face coverings in appropriate circumstances. In addition, I just read today that 28 states in the union require masks now statewide. After hearing all of the testimony and carefully weighing both sides, I will support the ordinance requiring face coverings. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Next in the queue is Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several amendments that I'd like to propose. First amendment, page 2, under the last whereas. I would like to strike, but recognizes that penalties are necessary to ensure such compliance. And included with that amendment, I would also strike item number 4, enforcement.
Second that.
And if I may, Mayor, I'd like to speak on that amendment.
Yeah, can you state it again? You cut out a little bit on the first part of the amendment.
Sure. Page 2, under the last whereas, there's verbiage that says, but recognizes that penalties are necessary to ensure such compliance. So my amendment is to strike that statement as well as item number 4 related to enforcement.
Okay.
So here's my primary concern with this. I mean, of all the emails that I've gotten, and I've gotten just as many as everybody else, not one single person has asked for businesses to be penalized for non-compliance. Businesses are not law enforcement. I don't support asking them to police their customers with a policy that they may not support. I'm not comfortable with an involuntary vigilante police force that puts businesses in direct conflict with their customers or risk losing their livelihood. They may display no shoes, no shirt, no service, but that's a policy they choose. They can choose masking as well, but it should not be mandated. To do so opens up our small business community to civil liability they can ill afford. Enforcement cannot be universal because not all businesses have a municipal license. And as a result, it puts some businesses in a position where they could be penalized and others not.
Thank you, Alder. We do have that amendment, and I believe it was, so it's offered by Alder Johnson, seconded by Alder Weary. Is that correct?
Burnett.
Oh, Alder Brunette. Apologies. Further discussion on that amendment before we get to the rest of the speakers.
My light's on, Mayor.
Alder Brunette, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Question for the city attorney. Before I ask the question, and it pertains to the amendment, what I am troubled by is many of the ordinances that we've seen lately can be very vague in how they're interpreted. And what I'm particularly troubled by with this particular one under enforcement section B, any business violating this section may be subject to administrative action for any license they possess with the city. So for Attorney Chavez, if you could explain what administrative action means and what it could lead to.
Administrative action is anything that we take against a person. So using the liquor licenses as an example, if somebody is not in compliance with their liquor licenses, then we are able to take action, including up to revocation.
That is a liquor license. What other licenses does the city issue to businesses and service establishments that the city could take administrative action against?
You'll have to give me a minute to pull up our ordinances.
Okay.
While Attorney Chavez is pulling that up, Mayor Genrich, I believe it was your ordinance or you were involved in drafting it. Do you know what sort of administrative actions on other establishments the city could take?
I mean, the principal action would be the revocation of the liquor license for a bar, restaurant, grocery store, convenience store.
How about other licenses before Attorney Chavez gets the answer? Do you know?
That's
So
a major-
I have it up.
Okay.
So
Thank
the
you.
licenses that we have are ambulances, auto salvage storage, bakeries and confectionaries, billiards and pool tables, game rooms, solicitor licenses, cigarettes, closing out sales, restaurants, liquor licenses, hotels and motels, junk and secondhand dealers, pawnbrokers, residential building contractors, retail food markets, city stadium, taxi cab, business licenses, operator licenses, circuses and carnivals, and that covers it.
So those are all licenses that the city of Green Bay issues to the business community. Is that correct? That's my understanding. So basically, thank you. If any of those businesses or establishments violate this order, it's under the discretion of, to assume the city attorney's office to begin administrative action against those businesses to possibly revoke their license to operate an establishment and make a profit and employ people, including their own self, in the city of Green Bay? Would that be a fair statement?
No. So the city attorney's office prosecutes any of the ordinance violations. So what would happen is they would be cited for failure to comply with the city ordinance, and then failure to comply with city ordinances is a condition of their license. So we don't just revoke because somebody has a single infraction against them. We take the multitude of it because there are due rights associated whenever you revoke a license. And so it would be considered in conjunction with any other citations that they receive.
Okay, what would a citation be for a business that does not comply with this ordinance?
Well, there's not actually any kind of penalty associated with it. It is primarily just the fact that you're violating it.
Okay, thank you. Now, do you see the problem with this? Under enforcement, it says, not you, Attorney Chavez, I didn't intend that for you, but for the council, any business violating this section may be subject to administrative action for any license they possess with the city. That is shocking because it's very vague in a way to anyone in the public who we answer to that were to read this ordinance. What's the penalty? A lot of gray area because it's not stated. All it says is administrative action. That could mean a number of things. These are people's livelihoods. Businesses, many of whom are just barely hanging on due to COVID. We don't need to keep adding additional burdens on the businesses to enforce this. It's up to us as a city, if we are passionate about passing this, that we clearly articulate what sorts of actions violations could entail. First violation, second violation, third violation. Administrative action is not acceptable. So I will vote for Alderman Johnson's amendment. I think it's completely proper to remove the enforcement from this ordinance and then move forward from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Additional questions or comments on the amendment?
I do.
Go ahead, Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along that lines, am I reading this correctly that it applies to any public place, even if you don't have a license? Correct?
That is correct.
That is correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I don't see, and maybe I missed it, where is the penalty for church? They don't have a license. So what would we do administratively to punish them? A bookstore, a hobby store, pet store. They don't have licenses with us. we're only addressing, and you can see where Alder Johnson was saying that's pretty uneven. One, you're going to take their livelihood, you're going to take their license potentially, and the other one, doesn't address it. Silence isn't good, generally. Okay, there's no answer, so we're not addressing it. Okay, so if you're a church, bookstore, hobby store. Go ahead. No, I was waiting.
Well, I was waiting for a question. I didn't hear one.
Really? Well, I'll state it again. There is a penalty clearly spelled out for people who have a license with the city of Green Bay that you could lose it through administrative vagary, right? What about it was pretty vague. I think Alder Burnett was pretty clear that it was vague. We're not sure what those administrative things are, what the steps are. It could be slap on the wrist. It could be take it. 1 warning, 2 warnings, 3 warnings. We don't know any of that. We're approving vagueness. Very vague.
Well, if it's administrative action is provided by law, that is not vague.
Pretty vague, in my opinion. That's your opinion. I appreciate that. But what about a church? That's an assemblage, right? They don't have a license, so how do you propose punishing them? Did you get
I
my
guess
question?
that would be well to determine.
I'm sorry?
That would be for you all to determine.
Well, why isn't it in here? I thought this was all ready to go. We're supposed to create it tonight? I mean, we just got this handed to us 24 hours ago, and not by email, like I had requested. It was just kind of it's in the packet. If you go online and look at it, just kind of figure it out. I'll tell you what, ordinances usually go to committee, get hashed out, people can talk about it, we tweak it, then it goes to council, and you gotta read it twice. This one, you want to ram through in 24 hours when we're getting 500 calls and emails from concerned people, and it's not even complete. What about parks? Shelters at parks, stands at sporting events. We're gonna send the police in to break up, God, you gotta put your masks on sitting in the stands. Are we gonna find ourselves then, or what? Are we taking police away from traffic duty and following up on crime to enforce masking at soccer events? I don't know. As you can see, it's pretty weak, not well thought through. I mean, I'm for the amendment because it makes it inkling better in case it passes, but I'm opposed to this overall. I'll have more to speak on it, but I'm not even getting, I don't remember ever being presented an ordinance that we don't have answers for. We said that's for you to figure out tonight. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess the situation is really, there's an ordinance that has been presented to you that meets constitutional muster and that applies a penalty that is as least severe as possible, which is what we've been hearing. And so we tried to make that happen for the council. And then we also limited it to just those businesses that have a license so that we were, again, limiting the amount of authority that was being exerted. But again, that is really up to the council. If you guys feel like penalties need to be imposed on everybody, that is the council's decision.
Okay, so just to clarify, this does apply to everyone, but we only are going to penalize people with licenses. You can see where that could easily be challenged and say, hey, my penalty a whole lot worse than this guy's penalty.
Well, that's the thing. Whenever somebody has a license, they have additional obligations that are placed upon them, and compliance with city ordinances is one of the requirements that is mandated for their licenses to be.
That's kind of like saying a taxi driver who speeds, we're going to take your license, but the guy who's going to church or the pastor driving people around, if you speed, okay. I know we're 0 for 1 going against COVID in our lawyerly area, so we're kind of 0 for 1. We lost that battle, so I maybe not as confident in this legal document. Thanks.
Additional comments on the amendment?
Mayor, can I speak? Alder Stoyer.
Go ahead, Alder.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank all the folks that participated We've had the 400 emails and calls that Alder Dorf said we have, and it's very true. It's been a very contentious issue. We've had, in 9 years on council, I've never had an issue quite like this. So I'm gonna talk about this. There's too many vague areas with this. And, I know the city is looking at doing something here, but I've been in touch with Brown County. I've talked to Supervisor Joan Brusky over time. And Brown County should be, if we move forward, should be the government that takes a look at this. We have 24 separate communities in
Alder,
Brown County.
Alder, appreciate
Yes.
the comments, but just make sure you direct them to the amendment.
Okay, well, the amendment then, there's other comments I'd like to make, but I think for now, I feel like it's too vague, and at least I agree with Alder Johnson on his tact on this. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder.
Mayor?
Alder Galvin, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for several different people on this amendment. So Alder Johnson, if I understand correctly, you want to pull the entire enforcement section out or just the part about licensing?
The entire enforcement section, and if another alder wants to propose a replacement, they can certainly do that, but I'm proposing to just eliminate it.
So you're proposing an ordinance with no enforcement to it?
Exactly.
Okay. But you're in favor of the amendment of the ordinance?
I'm in favor of the amendment I proposed.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Chavez, if we do have a business without any kind of a license and they are not encouraging or enforcing or anything else this ordinance I'm asking, how would you see any kind of a pressure to be brought to bear on them to make them comply with the ordinance?
So I think what we are confusing is what the purpose of the enforcement section was. The purpose of the A was really to gain compliance with it gives a directive to the businesses, and it's trying to seek voluntary compliance. There's not a penalty imposed upon anybody who fails to wear a mask. Instead, they're subject to a trespass charge when they're asked to leave, and that's what we're asking business to do, is if people are not complying with it, to ask them to leave. Now, the way it's written, we don't have an enforcement mechanism for any businesses who don't comply, the exception being licensed businesses, because it is an obligation of their license to comply with city ordinances. And so if they fail to comply with them, their licenses are subject to action per law. It's the same as somebody who's driving with a license. The license trumps, like you have an obligation to meet those standards. Similar to with a commercial license, you're subject to different standards because you do have a commercial license. So there isn't a mechanism in here to address that, because the point was simply to gain compliance.
Okay, then I guess, and I go back to the days when smoking was allowed in establishments, and that law came into place where they were no longer allowed. And people are worried about enforcement. The police department never went out looking for smoking violations. It was if they walked into an establishment and someone was smoking, then they took some action. And there was a specific, though, citation that could be issued. There was one establishment that was charging smokers a fee to smoke in their establishment, because when they got the ticket, they just merely went into the kitty, took the money out that people have been paying to smoke, and they paid off their fine. So after a period of time, the city became wise to that, and that's when they went after their license. But it was after quite a bit of trying to work with the establishment. I guess I have never seen the city act in a manner that would put someone's license at risk unless that establishment was purposely not enforcing or not taking any kind of action with that ordinance. So I see here where not having specific penalties, I mean, if alders would be happy with first offense, $100 plus costs and on up the list, and then the fourth time they take away the license, I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, or if, like they said, we're merely looking to get compliance, and this is a soft way of going about that. And individuals obviously have the right to appeal to committee, where people that are against this would certainly be able to back those companies up. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Alder. Comments on the amendment?
Mayor,
Yes, Alder Johnson.
I just want to speak a second, so I'll defer to someone else if they haven't spoke yet.
Any other Alder?
Yes, Mayor.
Alder
This
Lefebvre,
is
go ahead.
Alder Lefebvre.
Yes.
Yes, I concur with Alder Galvin. I think that what he had mentioned would be more appropriate. It does give some direction. I think we have to look at that. Like you said, the first time is just a warning, and then you can make it progressive. Because we definitely don't want to penalize, in a way, our businesses. We don't want to take their license away. We just want people to follow a simple ordinance. That's all it is. So I think right now on the amendment, I probably would vote yes on it, and then to go back for B and put something in there. Maybe A and B or something. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Any other Alders before Alder
Yes.
Johnson for a second time?
Your Honor.
Alder Scanlon, go ahead.
Thank you. I would support this amendment if the alder would attach as Alder Galvin suggested, a scale for penalties. I don't want to take this out and just leave it blank. I want to talk, if we're going to talk about the penalties, let's figure that out and then change this section to be what we want it to be as far as penalties. And as far as that goes, when I first proposed this, I did offer some suggestions, and one was a sliding scale of fees or penalties for businesses. And working through this with our police department and getting public input, it was determined to try and go softly and not turn the police into the face mask police. So I'm willing to give that a shot. I think, we don't want this to be, there's been enough uproar on this, and I've heard those voices, and I would like to also just take a second here and thank everyone for your input, as Facebook, email, the whole works. Had a lot of great conversations. I want to apologize to people I never was able to get back to, but I did read your emails or listen to your voicemails if I didn't get back to you. And I really appreciate it. And I think listening to people who were against this, taking in a lot of their concerns, I think perhaps going with a soft approach, which is more like we are highly recommending in a very, very strong way with an ordinance that doesn't have a lot of teeth to it, is to try to work with everyone in our community to make an ordinance that everybody can live with. So I'm all for if the majority thinks that we should, have a little bite to this enforcement and put a little more boot work with our police, that they will be more involved in enforcing this. I can go with that, but for right now, unless we do come up with some other enforcement, I'm not going to support this, and I'm fine with going with a soft approach at this time. So, thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Any other Alders before Alder Johnson for a second time?
I'd like
Mayor
to speak, Mayor.
Mayor?
Alder Van der Leest.
Alder Van der Leest, go ahead.
Thank you. I think, you know, if you look at this face covering resolution, it's got a lot of hiccups in it and too many uncertainties, you know, as far as the amendment, you know, how we're going to do it. I think the best thing the city could do would just make a resolution to recommend face covering. And I think most of the community, that's what they'd like. From talking to a number of people, most businesses, they don't want to be tied down to a resolution like this. I think the public is doing a good job right now in Brown County. Most of your businesses, your hospitals, doctor's office, they all require masks. City Hall requires one, county requires one. I don't think we need any face mask resolutions. I think there's enough laws on the books right now.
Alder Vanderleest, you're not speaking to the amendment.
I'm just talking about the
Alder
amendment.
Scannell
We don't
agrees.
need the amendments either. We don't need any of this. I feel that, you know, we don't need any input as far as amendments. They're talking about, you know, still having penalties, you know, taking away the business. In other words, the business people have to, you know, have a harder time now if we pass this than they did before. They had enough time, enough problems with, you know, what's been going on the last 3 or 4 months. They don't need any more restrictions. They don't need any more. I think the community's doing well now. That's my thought. And I don't think we need to pass this face mask resolution at all. And as far as penalties, more penalties on the business, I'm not for that at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Was it Alder Dorf who was seeking
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want a clarification. Are there 2 different amendments we're talking about, or is there one amendment? Alder Johnson, could you clarify? You said something about some item 2 or something. I couldn't find that.
The one amendment is intended to strike language in both of the areas that I referenced.
Yeah, so I missed, so the first one, which is the first part again?
Page 2.
Page 2, okay.
The last whereas.
Page 2.
So the third paragraph. Third paragraph from the top.
Okay.
It said, and there's, on that last sentence, it says, but recognizes that penalties are necessary to ensure such compliance. My amendment is to strike that statement.
So when we vote on this, we'll vote on 2 separate amendments, right?
No,
I'm not comfortable voting on one amendment. There's 2 separate things we're talking about, but I'm just asking.
This is just one amendment. We could certainly ask Attorney Chavez if it's appropriate. But I believe they both relate to enforcement.
Correct.
There's no issue with them being considered one.
Let's say that again, Attorney Chavez.
I said there's no issue with it being considered one.
Okay.
Because it's both about penalties. Okay, so you're taking out that penalties would be out, then you're taking out the entire enforcement section. I wasn't understanding that Alder Galvin was talking about replacing it with various fines. I have to.
I was only saying that as an example, as if that's what they wanted. They were saying it was too vague, and I was saying, well, then they could have penalties put into it, which I don't prefer that. I prefer a softer approach, like as is.
Yeah, okay. I would say that, yes, definitely I prefer the way it's written right now. It's a soft approach. It's maybe subject. We have to have some enforcement with the ordinance. And it's very soft right now. And it doesn't say you'll pay $100 or $25 or whatever. Maybe subject. That is a great way for this to be written. And this is the way other ordinances are written. Some are more specific and some are not. So I will be voting against the amendment. Thank you.
Alder. Any other comments before Alder Johnson?
Mayor, Alder Steuer.
Alder Steuer for a second time. No, Alder Johnson is ahead of you.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple clarifications. So one is, 89%, according to the Wisconsin DOT, 89% of the state of Wisconsin is in compliance with the seatbelt law. And yet the only penalty for not wearing your seatbelt is a $10 fine. So the point is, with something like that, you can gain a vast majority of compliance with a very, very small penalty. In this particular case, I'm proposing the amendment that I'm proposing because I feel that it is not appropriate for the businesses in our community to be responsible for policing this ordinance. That is the purpose of this. And if I would maybe ask Attorney Chavez, if I'm not mistaken, proper parliamentary procedure does allow one amendment to an amendment. Is that correct?
Give me 1 second, pull it up.
Okay, and I'll clarify why I'm bringing that up. Because any member of city council right now, if they want to, could make an amendment to my amendment replacing the enforcement verbiage. So that if it gives you more comfort and ease, you could do that. But my objective is still to remove the component that puts businesses in the middle of its customers in the law.
So my cheat sheet confirms that it can be amended, but it does direct me to the rules to see how many times. So give me a second and I'll give you a final answer.
Okay, while Attorney Chavez is looking into that, Alder Johnson, would you be okay with going to Alder Stoyer?
Yes, thank you.
You bet. Alder Stoyer.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Well, I was going along with Alder Johnson on this, but it seems like, when you have an ordinance without enforcement, that it could be a two-edged sword, so to speak. So you could look at something like this. I'll just throw it out there for everybody to listen to. You could have a first offense would be an educational talk, if you will, or some kind of setup by where the person is told, okay, this is what we have on the books. The second offense could be a written warning. And the third offense could be a citation, not less than $5 and up to $500. I'm just throwing that out for conversation. I've been talking with the county on some of this, and I like the tack that they're going with. So I'm going to bring that forward, and if anybody's interested, they can speak on that. Thank you.
Alder. Attorney Chavez.
Can I speak to an amendment?
Yes, for a second time, Alder Dorf.
Alder Johnson, I could agree with striking letter B under number 4. I think I like the fact that the enforcement says businesses and organizations may rely on an individual statement if they claim to be exempt from this section for the reasons permitted herein. I think if I would be willing to support if you just had letter A under enforcement and strike letter B. Are you open to that?
I like my amendment the way that it's proposed.
Okay, you offered us to do an amendment, so I tried.
Well, I think Attorney Chavez is verifying if that can be done.
Attorney Chavez?
Can be.
It's a long section. Give me a second.
Okay. Alder Dorf, you still have the floor.
Okay, so my understanding was it could be amended once, and she's checking to see if it can be amended more than once. But so you would not. Is there any part of A you'd be willing to keep, Alder Johnson?
I would prefer to see my amendment go to an up or down vote.
Okay, excuse me, I must have misunderstood what you were asking us to do, so I won't speak anymore. Thank you.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, Alder Lefebvre.
Yes, if we vote and it passes Alder Johnson's motion, then I would assume that someone can make a motion to put in something under enforcement?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The Robert's Rule states that there's the First Amendment, which is what's being offered by Alder Johnson, and then a secondary amendment, which would be anything to Alder Johnson's amendment, and a secondary amendment cannot be amended.
Very good. Thanks, Attorney. So we do have that amendment on the floor, and it has a second. Any further comments on the amendment?
Yes, sir.
Alder Scannell?
Alder Weary, I'll defer to Alder Weary first.
Alder Weary, go ahead.
Very generous of you, Alder Scannell. I just had to point out how many times have we listened to some older people bellyache that we're doing committee work at council. Lots of times. And here we are doing a lot of committee work. So next time we do committee work at council, some of you know we are, don't want to hear it. And also let's not put forth falsehoods. Alder Scannell stated there's no teeth in this ordinance. That's a toothless ordinance. Yeah, it's toothless. Well, let's see. Au contraire, mon frere. Licenses in jeopardy. That bites. That one has a little bit of tooth to it, a little bit. We are now mandating a possible trespass citation, right? How much is that? How much is a trespass citation? Chief or Vanessa or?
Attorney Chavez, Chief Smith, anybody have that?
I do not have the fine for a trespass citation. Sorry.
Can we look it up? I think that's kind of vital to what we're doing here if we're going to charge someone with a
I'm looking it up right now.
Thank you. Is that no matter what it is, it's that one's going to bite too. So that's 2 bites. And then we're cruelly asking city business employees to be the police. That has to be emotionally and physically pretty straining, pretty stressful. So that bites too. So I'm seeing 3 ways it bites, and I'll wait to hear on how much a possible trespass citation. So it's not toothless.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Scannell.
Yeah. First of all, I never said that this didn't have any bite. I said put more bite.
No, you said it had no 2 teeth.
Alder Weary, Alder Scannell.
Well, it's got gums. It's got strong gums.
I'll take that.
Okay. Yes. What I would like to ask Chief Smith, because I have an amendment I'd like to propose, because I do not want to vote for this without having some enforcement attached to it, is how do you feel about we made a continuum of fines, starting with a warning, then say 500 and then 1,000? Do you feel that would be putting the police in a more as a face mask policing force? Do you think that you're taking on more of that role if we go that route?
Chief Smith?
Yeah, well, certainly the police department will do whatever you as a council decide to do. That's our job. You guys enact the laws. You guys make the rules. The state legislature makes the rules. We follow rules and we enforce those rules that you make, unless they're found to be unconstitutional by the courts. As you're discussing, a first level citation or first level talking to, second level citation, or written warning, third level citation would cause us certainly a lot more work than going in and responding to a simple trespass that we would be enforcing.
Okay, so then I'm not gonna, oh, sorry.
I was just going to give you the number. The fine for a trespass inclusive of court costs is currently $187.
Thanks, Attorney. Alder Scannell, you have the floor.
Okay, well then I'm not going to propose an amendment. I think a softer, small teeth ordinance is maybe a more productive way to go. Listening to the very many voices who spoke out so strongly about just doing a resolution, I think this at least takes a couple steps that way, where we're not coming down with a hammer with non-compliance. So I'm going to not support the amendment and stick with trying to just use the coercion of abilities we have that are pretty lenient. I mean, you're going to get an individual's going to get a trespassing fine if they become belligerent in the store. That's how they get that. The store will call the police, and then the police will have, just like any time anybody would go into a business and create a disruption. And then for a business, we would, like we do with liquor licenses and all our other businesses we've worked with in the past when there was non-compliance on issues, we always work with them to try to get them compliant. And then if we just, they were so adamant about not compliant, then we took sterner measures. So I don't think that the threat of losing your license is something that's going to happen too quick, and people are going to be worried they're not compliant right off the bat, that they're going to be losing their license. So I don't support this.
That's foolish.
Amendment. Oh, did you hear me?
Just, yes, we heard all of that. There's somebody who is, I'm going to mute all, because there's somebody who's unmuted, and then the next alder who'd like to speak, just unmute yourself.
Mayor, this is my second time on the amendment.
Yes,
It's
go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is very troubling. The enforcement is troubling in that we are using administrative action against a business. Many people on this call who are not knowledgeable of our city government probably don't know what that means. Council members here, 12 of us, really didn't know what it means. And how in the world can we propose an ordinance? Can the city government propose an ordinance where people on this call who drafted it or whose idea it was didn't even know what the municipal citation was for trespassing? How in the world can we put forward something and put penalties against our public, our very people who this government owns, belongs to, without knowing what the ordinance, without knowing what the fine was for trespassing? That tells me that this was not thought out as well as it should have been. This should have been discussed at committee. The committee made the recommendation to essentially kill it twice. But here we are debating something, and our city leadership did not even know what the municipal fine was for trespassing. This is bad government. I'm for the amendment. Just because that tells me that we're not really thinking about this as clearly as we should. We just want to put it out there so we can get our people to comply. And listen, COVID is seriously, I'm not dismissing that. This is a serious pandemic we're dealing with. We've heard it over and over again. This cannot be rushed. We're putting substantial penalties on the public for something that we didn't really think about that clearly. No one on this call could tell us what the municipal fine was for trespassing. That is not acceptable. Sorry, it's not. When you're drafting an ordinance, that's the penalties, the financial ramifications, that's one of the first things you should consider. I'm for the amendment, and then we got to move on and start talking about other things, but this is not right. It's not right. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Any questions or comments on the amendment?
Yeah.
Alder Galvin, go ahead.
This is my second kick at the cat. I think it's kind of funny that we're upset that we're going to have an ordinance that imposes a trespassing fine on people that refuse to comply with the ordinance, which means if they don't refuse, nothing happens. If they leave, nothing happens. It's only if they insist on entering the store and not leaving, something happens. And we're upset about that. But we're not upset, I guess, then, or are we upset if someone were to walk into Walmart tonight or any other store that currently has a mask sign up and that person refuses to leave? Is that okay if we charge them with trespassing or disorderly conduct? No one here seems to be thinking about that. And that's what's going to happen if this ordinance fails. We're still going to have stores that require masks. We're still going to have to deal with individuals that refuse to comply with those stores' orders. But I guess that's not that big a deal here. It's only if we have an ordinance, then it's a big deal. We have a soft approach to stores that don't comply. Alder Johnson talks about the seatbelt ticket. It is only $10 unless you have a child in that car who's unseatbelted, or unless it's more than one violation. Then they have a sliding scale for those citations. Because what we want is compliance. Almost all our laws and ordinances are designed to gain compliance. And that's all we're asking here of these stores. If they don't comply, if they purposely try to thwart the ordinance, then there are the possibilities that heavier penalties can come down. And that's why I'm not in support of this amendment. We have to have some teeth to this, or it's not worth the paper it's written on, which obviously I think this is what some alders would prefer. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. If there aren't any additional comments, we'll go to the vote on the Alder's amendment, which.
Mayor?
Yes, Alder LaFave.
I had to unmute myself. Listening to others, and I think, yes, if we can't, if Chief of Police had said that if we do the education and the written warning and then the citation, it's more work for him. So I am going to vote against this amendment. And I also think if you really read it, it always says may. It does not say will. Excuse me, my voice is starting to go. It says may. So that's up to the business to decide. And this here is up to the city and the council to decide on what we decide to do. So it's not heavy-handed. And as Alder Galvin mentioned, it's a soft, excuse me, a soft approach. Thank you.
Alder. Don't have any further comments on the amendment. We will go to.
Mayor, could you just have, read the amendment, what the amendment's going to do? Give us that information on the amendment again, please.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Alder Johnson, but the amendment, I believe, deletes references to penalties in that last whereas clause on page 2. The aspect that says, but recognizes that penalties are necessary, deletes that language and then deletes the enforcement section on the final page of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we will use the board.
Mayor, I'm gonna have to vote verbally. Alder Steuer.
Yes, Alder?
I vote no. I vote for Alder Johnson on this one, so.
You're voting yes on the amendment?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay. So that amendment fails 7-5. So you have a list of speakers here. Sure.
No rights left.
It is. So if there's an alder that would like to seek recognition, it's probably the best way to do it.
Yep.
Alder Weary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion to refer this to the Protection and Policy Committee because it obviously needs a lot more work. Thank you.
Second.
Motion made by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Brunette to refer back to Protection and Policy. Discussion on that motion.
We'll refer to, because I really didn't come from there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Your Honor.
Understood. Alder Scannell.
Yes. My original, when I first brought this forward, this was a very time-sensitive issue. And when I brought it to committee, it was my recommendation to committee to refer this to staff to bring to a committee of the whole so that we could go over it because it is a time-sensitive issue. We don't have the time to kick it around, and then by the time it comes to council again, it's too late. If we don't do this now, there's no point in doing it. So this is why it became incumbent upon us, because of the emergency situation we are in, to do committee work on the floor. If it were not an emergency situation, I would have not recommended to the committee.
Alder Scannell, can you just hold your comments? I need to mute everybody again, and then if you could unmute yourself and proceed.
So it was strictly because this is time sensitive.
Mayor, would I be able to weigh in real quick?
Certainly.
Yes, as long as Alder Scannell.
Certainly.
The floor. Attorney Chavez.
So just so everybody is aware, because this was done under emergency powers, the proclamation is subject to ratification, alteration, modification, or repeal by the governing body. But the subsequent action is not does not affect the prior validity of the proclamation. So if this is referred back to or referred to committee, it will take effect, and and then it will be subject to whatever the committee or whatever the governing body ultimately decides.
Oh,
Can you say that last bit just one more time, Attorney Chavez?
Yes, because this was enacted under the emergency powers, it is subject to ratification, alteration, modification, or repeal. So it is going to go into effect on the day, the effective date, which I believe is the 27th.
Correct.
And after the committee and council decide, then the action will be taken in response to that. But it will go into effect if the council does not take action on it tonight.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
so in that case, if we passed it tonight and it went into effect as is, or whatever changes we make tonight, but we still refer it to committee, and committee makes some other changes and comes back, we could then amend the proclamation? Correct? Attorney Chavez?
Correct. If nothing happens on it tonight, it will go into effect. And then it will be subject to whatever amendments happen later. But what isn't in place today is what will go into effect if the committee, or the council, I should say, does not act on it.
Okay, well then, I have no objection to sending this to committee then. I think
My motion is rescinded.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Alder.
I got time.
So we're back to the item itself. Comments or motions?
Yep, I have a motion.
Alder Weary?
Thank you. Wherever appropriate, I'd like to exempt places of worship, wherever exemptions are. That's my motion.
I think Alder Vanderleest was attempting to second the motion. He's muted.
Alder Vanderleest, is that correct?
That's correct. I'd second the motion.
Okay. Discussion?
Question for where, I didn't see anything, would that be assemblages? How would that be written into the, what would that look like, Attorney Chavez?
There's two options. I think that the cleaner option is to put it in the exceptions as a separate item. The other one would be just to list it as indoor area access for B, the one you guys voted on the amendment earlier, to specifically list it there. I think, but like I said, I think the cleaner one, so that people will find it easier, is to list it in the exemptions under 3.
Okay. Is that your wish, Alder Weary?
Sounds good. Yes.
Okay. So adding places of worship under exemptions. Discussion. Seeing none, we will go to a vote on that. It's been made, motions have been made by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Vanderleest. We will use
Board, please.
Yep, we'll use the board on this exemption
you.
for places of worship.
Mayor, Alder Stoyer votes yes.
Thanks, Alder.
Alder Scannell, it didn't show up.
That amendment succeeds 7-5. All right. Other alders seeking recognition?
I do have a question.
Yes, Alder Weary.
Thank you. I did have someone ask me about the, under definitions, 1A face coverings. The last part of it, face shield which covers the mouth and nose, fits snugly against the side of the face and is secured on the head. I did have someone ask me that there are face shields worn as OSHA PPE that don't touch the sides of the face, but they do protect the mouth and nose. Is that fixable here, or what? OSHA approved face shields? I don't know.
Yeah, really up to you, Aldo, whatever you're comfortable with.
Mayor?
I'll think about it. I'll cede the floor right now.
Okay, Alder LaFave.
Yes, maybe it doesn't make sense because it's saying then a face shield covering mouth and nose, fitting snugly against the side of face. The shield usually doesn't. So I think maybe the shield should be more at the end. What you're talking about is the mask covering the nose and all that, and that should cover the mouth, let's see, should fit snugly against the sides of the face, or a face shield which covers the mouth and nose. Because from what I've seen, the face shields do not cover snugly against the side of the face.
Okay, additional thoughts on the item as amended?
What was the amendment exactly?
I didn't.
No, I was referring to places of worship amendment. Which,
that one.
Oh,
that one
I'm
passed.
sorry. I thought we were at the face covering. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we are. I'm just saying there was a successful amendment, so I'm referring to the item as amended.
Oh, okay. Well, should I make a motion that the face covering, the way it is written, should be rewritten? Okay, face covering means a manufactured homemade cloth covering that fully covers an individual's nose and mouth, and is secured with ear straps or otherwise tied so as to prevent slipping, and fits snugly against the side of the face and is secured to the head, or a face shield which covers the mouth and nose.
Okay, so that's
This
eliminating.
is Attorney Chavez.
Yes,
The way we can do it to make it very simple is to just remove fit snugly against the side of the face.
Okay. Okay, that's my motion then, to take out fits snugly against the side of the face.
I'll second that.
That was seconded by Alder Stevens.
If I could,
Yeah, just confirming, seconded by Alder Stevens.
Yes.
Alder Scannell.
it should cover the side of the face, maybe not snugly, but the shields should cover the side of the face. It shouldn't be open at the sides. So maybe just take out the word snugly. It covers the side of the face. Fit snugly.
Okay.
Or fits.
Okay, I'll take that as a amendment to my amendment. Okay, snugly. Let's take the word snugly out. That's my amendment.
Yeah. Fits.
Can we actually change it to covers the side of the face?
Covers the side of the face. Okay, yeah, covers the side of the face.
Okay.
Whatever is the proper way of putting it, that's my amendment.
Okay, and that is still seconded by Alder Stevens?
Yes.
Okay. Comments on that? Seeing none, we'll go to the board on this amendment.
My board isn't coming up. Oh, it came up. Okay.
Mayor, this Alder Steuer, I vote yes.
Elder. That amendment is adopted 10-2. Further comments on the item?
Mayor?
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes, Alder Galvin.
Are we just talking about the ordinance as it stands now? Are we moving forward with that, or are we still looking for other amendments and things like that?
I have other amendments.
Yeah, it's certainly appropriate to entertain amendments.
All right, I'll hold my comments until Alder Johnson is done.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to amend item 4B, that we strike item 4B.
Second.
And I would explain that this particular item, it seems to me that the other alders that were uncomfortable with my initial amendment were really related to item 4A. So I'm requesting that 4B be struck because, again, this is the one that relates to imposing penalties on businesses with their licenses to the city, and there seems to be sufficient enough vagueness around this that it really isn't adding anything of substance to this document.
So there further discussion on that amendment, which would be removing 4B.
I just have a question.
Yeah, Alder Galvin, go ahead.
This is for Alder Johnson. What would you recommend for a company that is knowingly violating the spirit of this ordinance day in and day out? How should the city handle that then?
I would defer to the mayor, but I don't believe that this type of back and forth is allowed.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm just trying to get some grasp here of what the city could do. Maybe that would be for Attorney Chavez. If we don't have a sub B in there, Attorney Chavez, what could the city do for businesses that knowingly ignore this ordinance?
Yes, that question.
So this is more, in my opinion, an informative piece for the public, because if somebody is knowingly violating our ordinances, when their licenses come up for renewal, we take that into consideration when we recommend action being taken on them. So regardless, if somebody is ignoring the city's ordinances,
okay,
we
so there's
don't
some
just
pressure
look
that could be
at
brought. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Further questions or comments on that?
I do, Mayor.
Alder Brunette, go ahead.
I'm in favor of the amendment. I don't believe that that is an acceptable provision. Let's think about a business owner right now. You know, many are barely hanging on due to COVID, due to many things beyond their control. Inevitably, we're going to have people in the city who are not going to comply. So the city, the business owner is basically going to have to enforce this against some of their customers, many long-term customers who may never come back to that business because they're frustrated being turned away. The business has to comply with it. And if they don't, they're subject to administrative action by the city of Green Bay, which possibly means losing their current license as the extreme part of the enforcement. I know there are several steps up until that point, but we just heard the city attorney say that the future issuance of licenses could be affected. I don't think that we should weaponize city government against our businesses. That's not appropriate. I don't like it. It's just not right. I mean, think about what we're doing here. This is a very punitive action on our business people who provide taxes to this community to fund this government. and we're going to make them enforce this against their own customers. And we already know, based on things we're seeing in other municipalities and videos we've all watched, the enforcement of this is tough. There are going to be people that resist. It's going to happen. I don't want to jeopardize our businesses and cause them additional stress and worry that somehow, somewhere down the line, the city of Green Bay is going to revoke their license. If not now, then a year or two when they reapply for the license. Not appropriate. I'm for removing this provision, and I commend Alder Johnson for bringing it forward again. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Any thoughts? Hearing none, we will use the board.
Mayor,
Alder
Mayor,
Scannell,
I'm
and
sorry. May I
Alder
speak?
Scannell and then Alder LaFave.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when you look at this here, do you think that the business owner is going to call the police for every little thing? And then there's also exceptions for all those people. All they have to say when they come into the store is that I have a health exception. I have one of the exceptions listed in this ordinance. And the owner is probably going to say, okay, please keep your distance then. You know, they're going to be polite about it. I don't see. And then for a business, as it's been stated, I don't think we're going to go after a business right away. We're not going to. I think probably what the city will do will be talking to the business and just saying this is the best for everybody. Please try to follow this year. Do the best that you can. I don't think there's going to be that we're going to just willy-nilly take someone's license away. This is an important thing. But also we have an ordinance. We have ordinances and we have rules and laws where if a bar is constantly allowing underage people in, we've closed them down. We took their license away. I hope you're not thinking, some alders who've said this, that you're not thinking that, oh, that's a punishment and we're going to lose that business. There was a reason why we took it away from them, because they continually did not follow any of the proper rules and regulations. So I don't think that we're going to be out there just taking people's licenses away. Thank you.
It's Alder Scannell.
Yes, I think we kind of covered this before, and also I think for me this is just like when we went with smoking. Again, that was put upon the businesses to address that, and I don't think it was the end of the world. I hope that if a business is dealing with a customer that is being non-compliant and being disruptive, that they back away and call the police, and that's where the A comes in. So I don't think that this is terribly coercive or onerous or inappropriate than anything else we've done in the past. And I think we need a little something. Again, I don't think we could, again, list a series of fines. This is a much softer approach, a much more cooperative approach. And I'm all for trying that out before we need to resort to bringing down a hammer on businesses for being non-compliant. So I do not support removing this from the ordinance.
Alder.
And Mayor, can I mention one other thing?
For a second time, Alder LaFave.
Yes. Also, it says in the first, an A, it says the authorized representative of the business or organization. That would be the manager or the business owner. It is, people had talked about this. Oh, they got 17-year-olds checkouts and that they're going to be in harm's way because someone might get belligerent with them. This is not, none of the employees are going to be doing this. It says the authorized representative of the business. That means a manager or an owner would be taking care of this. So that's just another thing everybody should be aware of. Thank you.
Alder Galvin, go ahead.
Thank you. In my experience over the years, working in several businesses and taking police action in several businesses. And even officers were told that in off-duty situations merely become good witnesses. No one's saying that people have to go, these employees have to go hands-on with these individuals that refuse to comply with orders, to put a face mask on and or to leave the building. And again, these are these people's buildings. I mean, how do they handle shoplifters? How do they handle people that become disorderly or domestic disputes that erupt in their businesses or their stores? And many of the places that I think some of you alders seem to be worried about are restaurants and bars. And if I understand this ordinance correctly, there's no mask required in those establishments anyway by the customers. It would only be the staff that would have to be wearing the mask. So I'm not really sure where all this concern is coming from about overreacting employees or employees putting themselves at risk when merely all they have to do is ask someone to put on a mask, just like they would ask them to put on their shirt or put on their shoes or whatever other rules the store may have. And if that potential customer doesn't comply and doesn't leave, they pick up the phone and they call the dispatch center and the police are sent. And all they do is become good witnesses. I don't see how that is putting the businesses at risk. The ones I'm worried about are the businesses, like I've mentioned before, the particular bar with smoking, that basically laughed at the state statute and the ordinances in the city and laughed at the enforcement action because they collected a fee from everyone that smoked. And those are the businesses I think that we would be applying Section B to, and only after they had been given warnings. I mean, the police department issues warnings all the time, sometimes verbal, sometimes written. And even when they issue citations, I've seen our Protection and Policy Committee take many citations and incidents like that and downplay them and handle it at a much more subtle level. But I'm concerned where suddenly alders are accusing our other alders of taking draconian measures against businesses that don't comply with this ordinance. And I'm not sure where it's coming from because I've never seen it in this city yet when it comes to other types of violations. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, my second time.
Yes, Alder Brunette.
Second time on the amendment. Attorney Chavez, again, could you clarify the list of businesses that the city of Green Bay provides licenses to?
You want me to read the list again?
Yes, please. So I think the council needs to hear that again.
Ambulances, auto salvage storage, bakeries and confectionaries, billiard and pool tables, game rooms, solicitors, cigarettes, closing out sales, restaurants, fermented liquor licenses, hotels and motels, junk and secondhand dealers, pawnbrokers, residential building contractors, retail food markets, sales at City Stadium, taxi cab business licenses and operator licenses. And those are primarily it.
Thank you. Now, Alder Galvin, if I could, Mayor, I agree with, I understand where Alder Galvin is coming from. I really do. But I think why this is most concerning is the lack of public awareness of the issue. So basically, the committee had made, and this speaks to the amendment, Mayor, so please allow it. The committee made the vote, okay? The agenda was published on the Green Bay City website. It did not include this amendment. It did not include, I should say, it did not include this ordinance, okay? This ordinance was not included in the agenda packet when it went to the public. The mayor had a press conference on Monday morning, announced it early in the morning. Many of the city council members were not invited, as far as I'm concerned. I didn't get an invitation, and I'm the city council president. So then the press conference is held. From what I understand, it was scheduled outside. Secondhand knowledge here. Again, I was not invited. This is not a personal slight. I'm not trying to be childish about it, but I'm just trying to understand the process and why I believe it's poor government and why the public is rallying against it in the moment. So we were not invited or consulted on the idea. Many of us were surprised to hear about it on social media. It was scheduled to be held outside. 20 to 25 members of the community, many of whom this will affect in a very real way.
Although you got to get to your point.
This is to my point, Mayor. This is exactly my point. It affected real people. Somehow along the way, the press conference was moved inside. 20 to 25 members of the public did not have access to their city government when this was presented to the press. We get it later. We get it a couple hours before the end of business. Great, I'm glad we got it at least. So that if we did not know what was going on, how could we?
These comments are definitely more appropriate on passage.
Well, no, to be honest, I disagree because it points to the public opposition. 40 people, I don't know, were against it today, 11 for it. The people who have been contacting me, they didn't even have a chance to read the ordinance. So it does go to enforcement because now we are saying to them, oh, here's the ordinance. And if I'm a business owner in this community, I am outraged because this affects them in a very real way. It's not right. The way it was done, the way it was revealed, that's fine for removing this provision. We can't give the public 1 day notice and say, your city government could possibly revoke your license on something that you were only informed about a day before. And then, oh, by the way, maybe not this year or next year, or in the future when you reapply for your license, we're going to remember this. That is, Alder Gal, when you say it's draconian, I get it. That's a strong word, but I'm telling you that that's the way it appeals to me. I represent people in this district, businesses that are barely holding on. And we throw this on them and we wonder why the public is angry. And you wonder why people say draconian and this and that. It's not their way to do it. And I know many of you understand that. I don't know why we're doing this to the public. It should have been discussed at committee. I'm for removing this. I applaud Alder Johnson for the idea and being very bold about it. You're looking out for the businesses in this community, and that is never a bad thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Further comments on the amendment? Hearing none, we're going
Did I speak
to
twice?
go to the vote. On the vote, use the board.
Let's just vote.
Alder Scannell?
We can just vote. It's all right.
We'll use the board.
Mayor, is this is to remove B, right?
4B, correct.
Mayor, this is Alder Stoyer. I vote yes.
Thanks, Alder. So that is a tie, 6-6. I vote against. That amendment fails.
Mayor, do I still have the floor?
Sure, go ahead, Alder.
All right, I move to amend section 2, sunset provision. It currently reads, this ordinance is hereby repealed immediately upon termination of the City of Green Bay's declaration of emergency. I would amend that at the end of that sentence, we add, or if the county adopts a countywide mandate.
Second.
I'll second that.
Any further comments? That motion has been made. An amendment's been made by Alder Johnson, seconded by Alder LaFave.
Could you state that again, please?
The language that I'm adding is, or if the county adopts a countywide mandate.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Mayor, the reason I'm proposing this is because if I'm not mistaken, without that verbiage, both ordinances would coexist, and it would require future action by this body to rescind this ordinance. So I'm adding that so that we can expedite that process.
Right.
Where exactly does that line go? I'm trying to pull it up here.
It's on page 3, Alderdorf, under section 2, which is at the bottom of the page.
I don't have any objection to that, just from my
Okay.
perspective, it's something that I've said that I intended to do. So just for council's benefit.
Your Honor.
Yes, Alder Scannell.
I am a little concerned with that. I don't know. I mean, if the county just passes one for county buildings, I don't know that I would want our ordinance to be rescinded. I would like to know what the county passes before we rescind our ordinance. I mean, I should hope it would be pretty much what we've got, but I don't know. I don't know what they're going to come up with. I expected them to come up with something before. I mean, I was hoping not to have to do this. I expected the county to step up earlier, and that didn't happen. So I don't know. Until I know what they've got, I don't support automatically rescinding.
On that point, Alder, if I could ask Attorney Chavez a question.
Sure.
The comments that I made were that if the county were to adopt something substantially similar, I would rescind our action. Is that appropriate legal language, substantially similar?
Yes, although I don't really see an issue with the language that's proposed because it does say a countywide mandate. So it wouldn't be countywide if it just applied to the county buildings.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I'm fine.
Further comments, questions?
You can do the board.
Absolutely. We will move to the vote. That was offered by Alder Johnson and seconded by Alder LaFave.
Mayor, this is Alder Stoyer. I vote yes.
That is adopted 11-1.
Mayor, I just have one final amendment.
Go ahead, Alder.
I would move that we amend item 4A and replace the language related to trespassing laws and replace it with a $10 municipal citation.
Second.
Has been made by Alder Johnson, seconded by Alder Brunette. So you removing that entire section and replacing it with?
No, just the piece that relates to trespassing, that they could be charged with trespassing laws. I'm replacing that with that they may enforce a $10 municipal citation. And I'm content with keeping or any other law they may violate. Obviously, if someone's doing something beyond that, that's a legit piece to keep there.
So you're deleting deleting enforced trespassing laws, replacing with may levy $10 municipal fine or whatever the appropriate language would be.
Issue, perhaps.
Attorney Chavez.
What we generally do when we are imposing a penalty is we make it mandatory. So the recommended language would be shall be subject to a municipal citation in the amount of $10.
Why is the language in here not mandatory right now?
Because we're not imposing a new penalty. But if we are imposing a penalty, like we're relying on trespass. But if we are trying to impose a new one, then people need to know that their conduct is in violation of it, and this is what will happen.
So is it trespassing is a violation of a trespassing law, not a penalty?
Well, it is, but it's already established and has its own obligations attached to it.
Could you just explain that a little bit further? Am I the only one not understanding what that means, why there's a difference?
I think it's a difference between a new penalty and an existing.
Correct.
Penalty.
So the penalties already exist like trespassing law, for example, it already exists as an ordinance. Is that why?
Correct.
So from a legal perspective, is there any other penalty that the staff has considered besides a trespassing law?
Well, we did consider a penalty for a violation, and then of course disorderly conduct. But a person's conduct has to rise to it, which was why trespass makes the most sense. If a business owner asks somebody to leave and they don't, they're trespassing.
Are there, I think you had mentioned before, and I can't recall the exact number, but it was roughly around $180. Is that amount in the ordinance, or do we have the ability to modify the amount?
I don't remember how trespass is laid out. The city prosecutor does, but that is inclusive of court costs. Court costs, I think, are between $60 and $80. Last I inquired on it, so you're looking more at a penalty of, you know, $100 for trespass, somewhere in that neighborhood. With this, I'm sorry, the city prosecutor's emailing me right now. That's the default bond amount. And so what we would do here is if we were establishing it, we put a range. That's what we do with most of them. So we would say, shall be subject to a forfeiture of between, you know, $100 and $500, and that allows the judge to determine what the appropriate penalty will be. But here, if we're actually specifying why it is, or what it is that the penalty will be, then we set the penalty.
So I could say in this instance that we may enforce a $10 trespassing fee.
What do you mean?
Can I specify the amount here and still leave it as trespassing, but just specify the amount?
No, the penalty for trespassing is already established.
Okay, and do you know, you don't know what that range is?
The default bond amount is set by the judge for forfeiture. What I can tell you is that it's $187 inclusive of court costs. I'd have to go pull the actual amount to see what it is.
Okay, in any event, I think the amount is just far in excess of what I prefer, which is why I'm trying to reduce it. Is there any other way that you can think of that we could word this to reduce the amount of the penalty?
You can establish a range.
By the ordinance.
You can establish a range. So if you don't want to establish it as $10, well, you can establish $10. What I'm saying is that what you don't want to do is say may, because then we're not really creating an enforceable ordinance. What we do with ordinances is the penalty is subject to forfeiture of. And so if you want to say it's subject to penalty or forfeiture of $10, it is subject to that. Otherwise, you can set a range of, you know, 0 to 500 is generally what we state, but we do set penalties at other numbers.
Okay, so in that case, then I would amend that we have this say that it may enforce trespassing penalties of $0 to $20.
No, what we would be doing is either establishing a new amount for violation of this ordinance, or we just say they will be subject to trespass, like it originally states.
May I offer a little help?
Feel free.
Alder Johnson?
I'm okay to give up the floor for the moment. Yep.
I just think I maybe could suggest that you might state it like this. If the individual refuses to leave or continues to refuse to comply with this section, law enforcement shall enforce a $10 fine or any other law the individual may violate. Would that work? No?
We create an ordinance for that then.
Can I ask a quick question? Maybe this might help clarify. we have a shoplifting ordinance. And because we were having a lot of problems with repeat offenders, we established a first offense, second offense, and third offense penalty. What you have to be careful of is there's always court costs associated with it, which are mandated by city ordinance to try and cover some of the costs that are incurred when the city prosecutor and the judge and everybody else has to handle this incident. So I guess kind of keep that in mind when we're moving forward on this. I see where you're going, and it's kind of like the seatbelt ticket, pretty much. So I guess I would ask Vanessa if the ordinance would be the mask ordinance, and that's what they would be cited for, and that would be the $10 fee.
Correct. If we are putting a $10 fee, they are being cited for noncompliance with our face covering ordinance.
So then, Brian, it would be a specific ordinance for not complying with the mask. And so it would be up to the officer, I think, depending upon the person's demeanor and behavior, whether he charges them with a $10 fine or he goes with disorderly conduct or trespassing or something more serious. The officer would still have the option to issue a warning, verbal warning, written warning, or he could issue him a $10 ticket. And I would ask Vanessa, if it is a $10 ticket, do we have to add on the court costs?
Yeah.
Okay. So Brian, your $10 ticket would probably cost them about $90 when it's all said and done.
And I think it would be appropriate at this time to see if Chief Smith has any thoughts on this change.
The most important thing for me is that we allow our officers discretion. Sometimes a police officer in uniform coming in and explaining to somebody what's going to happen if they don't comply gets the compliance that we're after. And that's what we're all after here, right? We're all after voluntary compliance. So I don't want to have something that says our officers shall issue a citation. I want to give them the opportunity to explain to somebody what's going to happen. And then if you don't leave now, or if you don't comply with the face mask ordinance, then I will be issuing a citation. Give them that opportunity of a may cite instead of a shall cite.
And let me correct the language that I'm saying we need to put in place. It would say the individual shall be subject to a municipal forfeiture in the amount of $10. So it's not taking away that discretion for you to cite. It is literally saying it's putting in place the mandatory amount that they will be subject to if the officer chooses to cite them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Johnson, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate you, Mayor, for referring us for Chief's perspective, because that is exactly the point that I'm struggling with, right? Which is if we have to change the language to shall, I mean, we're in essence, they're required to do it. I'd rather leave them with the flexibility to not issue the citation. Instead, would take an opportunity here to urge the chief that if this ordinance does pass, that we exercise great discretion with the public and only enforce in instances of egregious violations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
May I ask a question of Vanessa?
Go ahead, Alden.
Chavez. The word may, when you're talking about law enforcement here, may, that doesn't may leave it up to the officer to decide if he is going to give that citation for trespassing, that he can decide if, like you said, the law enforcement person will come. The officer will talk to the person, explain the situation, and ask if they would please leave. And if they do not leave, then he may enforce that trespassing law. The word may instead of will. Will means that he would absolutely do the trespassing law. That's the way I'm taking it. Can you give me the definition for may and will with the enforcement?
So you are absolutely correct. May is permissive, shall is mandatory. What I'm saying is that we have to actually establish what the penalty is if a violation occurs, not take away discretion for them to enforce it. So what I'm proposing is that the language states the individual shall be subject to a municipal forfeiture in the amount of $10. Covers that. So somebody doesn't comply and they get cited, they are getting cited at $10. But it doesn't mean that they have to get cited. It's just saying that is what the amount will be.
But then they have to pay the court costs too, so.
Yeah,
okay.
They do. But that happens on every citation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So Alder Johnson, where do we stand then with your proposal?
Yeah, I guess that just sheds a little bit different light on this. So if using the word shall does not necessarily require police to issue the citation, that would be my amendment, that the citation shall be $10.
Okay.
May I ask Alder Johnson, then you want to take out the trespassing law?
Yes.
And any other law?
I'm okay with any other law, but I'm looking to eliminate trespassing.
Yeah, actually, that would be okay, because if the owner wants the officer, that would leave it up to the owner to decide if he wants to enforce the trespassing law then, or any other violation.
So Attorney Chavez, can you
Yeah.
encapsulate what Alder Johnson is hoping to accomplish by just reading the relevant pieces of 4A?
I think that Alder Johnson and I are actually saying the same thing, just not understanding each other. So,
law school, one did not.
Go ahead.
I was just joking. Go ahead.
So what 4A would now read is any individual who fails to comply with this section shall be asked to leave by an authorized representative of the business or organization. If the individual refuses to leave or continues to refuse to comply with this section, the individual shall be subject to a municipal forfeiture in the amount of $10 or any other law the individual may violate.
Yes, that is my amendment.
I'll second that.
Motion
Thank you, Attorney Chavez.
to amend by
You're
Alder
welcome.
Johnson, seconded by Alder LaFave. Discussion on the amendment. Being none, we will go to the board.
Mayor, this is Alder Stoyer. I vote yes.
And that is adopted 10-2. And I believe that was your final amendment, Alder?
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other proposed amendments? Otherwise, we could move to discussion of the item as amended.
Clear question or clarification, I guess.
Yes, Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 3E, if I could clarify, we kind of talked about it a little bit, and I'm not sure if it was totally clear, but individuals, so it's 3E, individuals in settings where it is not practical or feasible to wear face coverings when obtaining or rendering goods or services, yada, 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 consuming food or beverages. Now, I think Alder Galvin had mentioned that means all bars and restaurants are excluded. Is that correct, or is that not correct? I think he was asking the question as well, but I think we need some clarification there.
Right. Yeah, my understanding is when, during the action of consuming food or beverages, obviously masks would not be required. But I will go to Attorney Chavez for the legal opinion.
That is correct, because it states consuming food or beverages, it is limited to the time you're consuming it. Similarly with receipt of dental services, that would mean that you would still have to wear it whenever you're not actually in receipt of dental or medical services. And that would apply to everything that would fall under this classification. It is not limited to them. It is inclusive, but it is not limited to those types of services.
So, for instance, let's say you're a bar and people are eating popcorn and pretzels and drinking their beer all around the establishment. They're pretty much all exempt. Pretty much every bar is going to be exempt. They're going to have something to eat. You always have a drink in your hand.
I would say
Correct?
when they're sitting at the table eating and drinking, yes.
Well, most bars, a lot of people don't sit at a table. They might be standing around the bar, or standing in little groups with the beer in their hand, chucking popcorn in, pretzels, whatever they're doing, taking a sip. They're in the act constantly of eating something or drinking something. A case could be made then that pretty much every bar is exempt if you have some food and you're just drinking a little something. You're always in the act of eating or drinking. That'd be my suggestion for those establishments. What about wedding venues? You're gonna make everybody at a wedding wear a mask. Everybody, not in the church, but it may be at the hall later. Obviously not during dinner, but unless they're all eating snacks. I suppose a case could be made there too, where they always free beer and free soda, and they have the cake. So I guess that could be an exemption then too. Okay, so wedding venues are exempt and bars. Not sure about the restaurants. Okay, thank you.
That's not an accurate reading, but I appreciate the.
Well, that's my opinion. I think it'll be opinion of other people.
I appreciate the attempt at offering a legal opinion.
Huh? I'm gonna be challenged on that.
Any comments?
Mayor,
Yes, Alder LaFave.
wedding venues, when people are at a wedding, they're not always eating, sitting down to eat. So it's when they're sitting down to eat, and they do, they have their toast once in a while. But I think it's pretty open when you're eating or you're drinking. You don't have to wear a mask.
Right.
Yeah, it's simple.